fossils to show. Here is one that our fossil lady, our volunteers sort of are working on. We've been classifying all of the giant megafauna in Australia. Do you see the big tooth there? Now, we don't have any creatures, land creatures, living on the Darling Downs that have teeth that big. And look what came out of the same area. How's that for the, well, Diane, you can recognize the top of a leg bone, can't you? Where it's swiveled.
Yes, that's the ball of the ball and socket joint.
That's a ball and socket joint, that's right. Now, the rest of the leg I couldn't even pick up. You will find that this ball and socket joint is bigger than even our biggest bulls that we have on the Darling Downs. Darling Downs, named after Governor Darling's, I guess he wanted it to look, well, it really is a lovely place, but it's dry today. And you'll find that it's a little area in Australia, sort of west of Brisbane, a plains sort of area with rolling hills. It's a lovely place to be, but we grow cattle, we grow sheep because it's moderately dry. So I'm going to take you to a dig site on the Darling Downs during the drought a few years ago, before our flooding rains of the last couple of years. The farmers were expanding their dam. They called me, John, we found some bones. Come and help us dig them up. So we did. They were big bones. In fact, the help was there. We dug it out. We put it together. It's currently sitting in my back shed. And look at the size of the legs. We are trying to restore them so we can get them out without breaking them. Look, big hole, big bones. And it was dry enough for us to do this. Well, oh yes, you may be surprised to find that the biggest expense in extracting dinosaurs is often the glue. The same is true for the giant fossil animals we find on the Darling Downs. Yes, we would label a position, we would photograph every segment so we can restore the whole thing bit by bit with both photographs, as well as, can you spot the fossil in the middle left-hand bottom side? Once we found that, we knew what we were dealing with. That's a portion of a leg bone, a toe bone, and it belongs to the legs that show up. Let's get them come up first. Okay, here we are trying to quickly glue together one of the giant leg bones. Now that's a long, skinny leg bone. And many of these leg bones were very light because it turns out what we were working on was a giant fossil kangaroo. Okay, I'm having trouble with our laptop here. There we are. On the left-hand side is how big kangaroos used to be. On the right-hand side is a present-day giant red kangaroo. Now, some theme parks in Australia take advantage of the size of some of the kangaroos. There's a theme park in Sydney. They've got a monstrous kangaroo poking over the top of the trees, trying to attract in American and British tourists to spend their money. And one year, Dr. Diane Eager and I went to a museum to see some of the mock-ups of the kangaroos. Now, there's a traffic problem in Australia, as Joe will tell you. He saw his first kangaroos, hundreds of them. They were all dead.
One about every kilometre, I think.
Yeah, that's right. They'd been hit by cars and lorries, but they were only 3 feet to 6 feet, up to 2 meters tall. How would you like to run a car into that monster? Here's the present day ones. And as Joe said, he saw one every 2 or 3 kilometers. There's a present day giant red kangaroo. Now, one of the things we've discovered from digging up these fossils is not only did creatures get bigger, they were heavier. In fact, some of them today, there's a giant wallaby in the background. There's a present day wallaby in the foreground. Yeah, look at that. Now, our artists put that together. That's Photoshop. But in reality, the scale is impressive. Okay, so what you'll find is you have to answer some questions about even our climate, and you'll see why when you look at Australia's animals, giant teeth, we don't have them today. Giant jaws, yes, we could even try this whole bits there. We could even try to extract from the teeth the DNA or the jawbone. I mean, look at this one. What was it? That's a big creature. It's bigger than any creature that lives on the Darling Downs today, including the cattle that we feed in big bins. We have to bring the grass in. It can be expensive in a drought. The water supply is nowhere near as good as it used to be. And this black soil country that you dig them out of, I mean, we must have sorted 200 of our giant fossils the other day. Fabulous. No, I haven't let our assistant, our encouraging enthusiast who comes in, I haven't let them loose on the giant kangaroo fossil yet. That requires a fair bit of pre-preparation before the amateur person can even touch some of those bones. But the size, magnificent. And you know the first conclusion? There isn't enough food growing on the Darling Downs, even in a mildly wet summertime, to keep such huge creatures alive. So not only have they reduced in size, we have a pretty good reason as to why. Their number and their size has diminished because the big ones, they would have simply died out. There is not enough food. Even with our big creatures, the cattle, we have to bring food in. We have mega appeals on TV for truckloads of hay. And well, praise God for some of the generous farmers in other states where it's wetter, they'll ship up even free of charge to try and keep our cattle industry, our sheep industry alive. There is not enough food out there. Biggest natural selection pressure has actually ended up eliminating the giants. You see, even with peas, every now and then a tiny one is brought into existence. And the same is true with people. Every now and then, a tiny one. Yep, you've heard of dwarfs. You've heard of people who are just simply tiny. You've seen the pygmies in Africa. They come from the giant Zulus. You'll find that this happens to all creatures, whether it's kangaroos, whether it's human beings, whether it's crocodiles, or even the plants that produce such pygmy peas. Okay, if you have a dry season coming, if you have a continuous dry season where there's limited amounts of food, then the big ones are eliminated. It's natural selection. It's not evolution. It's the opposite. It's devolution. Only the little ones will survive. And once that gene pattern becomes the norm, there is no return that we know of. We can find no way to turn it back. And that's a good example of big, good to bad to worse, of great environment to degenerating environment. And even here in Australia, we can tell you that it wasn't the universal environment after the flood. The flood had produced incredible amounts of wet land in Australia, and it grew beautifully for years and years and years, and then it dried out and dried out. And Australia's normal climate today, it was not produced by people. Get that out of your head. That's climate change nonsense. It was drying out even before the Europeans got here. It was drying out when the Aborigines arrived. It's a consequence of good to bad to worse, even in the creation picture.